was an issue about the Levites. They took care of that issue. They fast and so forth before they leave. We talked about the idea that they didn't have guards and why. So, starting about down here with verse 24. You remember why the priests were selected. The priests were selected to carry all this gold and silver that the king had given as a gift to them. Now, I decided to back up just a little here, and the reason I backed up was because what I meant to tell you last week, and I forgot to tell you, I thought, of course, I'd think about this when I get home, which does you no good, obviously, but was how much gold and silver it was. It was a bunch. They were given this responsibility for carrying all this gold and silver. It has been estimated that the silver alone, I didn't get an estimate on the gold, but that will give you enough of an idea just by going on the gold, the silver. It's been estimated that the silver alone was 25 tons of silver. You know that when you just simply read that, that's not the image you get in your head. At least that wasn't the image I got in my head. So it's 25 tons of silver. Now you got 12 priests that have been given the responsibility of getting that to Jerusalem. Well, obviously it wasn't just 12 priests doing it, right? No way. So it had to be 12 priests that were the leaders of their families, and their families were all responsible for getting it there. We're talking about a lot of gold and silver. Okay? So, verse 31, we see that they leave Ahava. This is in Persia, or actually they're saying Babylon. They leave on the 12th day of the first month. And they say they leave on the 12th day of the first month. They go to Jerusalem. The hand of God was upon us, and he delivered us from the hand of the enemy and from ambush along the road. So, that one statement is all we got about the trip. No other details, really. Except they left on the 12th day of the first month, and they got there okay. And God took care of them along the way. All right. But a little more information. We'll go back to chapter 7, verse 9. We see that they actually arrive in Jerusalem on the first day of the 5th month. Okay? So you do a little checking and you figure out how long that trip actually took them. The trip took them about 4 months. They traveled about 900 miles. And they averaged about 7.5 miles per day. You might say, well, that doesn't sound like a whole lot. But remember what they're carrying. They're carrying all their worldly possessions plus well over 25 tons of silver. Who knows how much gold. And they still were able to make 7.5 miles a day. And remember, this is not just a small group, right? Remember from last week? These are thousands. There's a bunch of them. Okay. I want to give you some kind of an idea of, and I'll give Trish the credit for this. She deserves it, because I didn't think of it this way. She asked me a question while I was studying. She said, what was the weather like? Well, so I looked it up to see what kind of, maybe what the weather was like. So, all right, let's go back. They arrived in Jerusalem the first day of the 5th month. They left they left on the 12th day of the first month. So let's get an idea of where we're at here. Whoops, 2 minutes. Okay, here we go. So they left during the first month. Now, on the Jewish calendar, they have 12 months just like we do. They don't line up with our months. So that would have put it, first month is Nisan. That would have put it about March, according to our calendar. Okay, is when they left. How about the 12th day? So near the end of March on our calendar. They arrive in the 5th month, which would have been about our July. So we're traveling between what would be our months of March, the end of March, April, through about July. That's when they're traveling. Well, notice what that weather is like. This is the warm and dry time. Because, she was thinking about clothing. What kind of clothes were they wearing? That kind of stuff. Well, it's there in the warm and dry season. So as far as traveling is concerned, that's probably the best time to travel. You don't have to worry about cold weather. You don't have to worry about the rainy season. And so that made sense as to why they would travel during that time. Okay, we're going to come back to this and the later things we're going to look at. All right. It says they remained in Jerusalem for 3 days. I'm not sure exactly what they're doing. My guess is they were just playing a long trip, just resting. So they rest for 3 days before they really do anything else. And then we see what they do is in verse 33 and 34, you'll see that on the 4th day, they've been there 3 days. On the 4th day, they deliver the silver and gold to the temple. And notice in verse 34 what they do with the number and the weight of everything. And all the weight was written down at that time. So they basically gave an account of all the gold, all the silver they had brought, weighed it out and so forth when they got to the temple, and wrote it all down. Why would they write it down? And what are they going to do with what they've written down?
They feel that they must account for what they do to the Almighty God.
And to who? The king.
The king, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they've taken all this his gold and stuff, and they want to be able to have a record that we got all your silver and gold here all in one piece, all together. We got it all here. So they got a record of it. They send that information, of course, probably back to the king and said, we got here with everything you gave us.
Were they commanded to, when they got to the destination, to do something with tons of silver and I guess so much gold? Were they told when you get there you're going to do this?
No, this was simply gifts that were for the temple, for the use at the temple, and a lot of this gold and silver was also their form of currency, so they could use it to get whatever they needed for the temple and so forth. That's what it was basically for. Okay. In this verse 35, you see then, of course, now they got all that taken care of. They do make sure, and children of those who had carried away captive, who came from the captivity, offered burnt offerings to God, to Israel. And they mentioned here how many animals they've killed and so forth. So they make sure, not only have they take care of this and make account of this, but they also, what are they doing here?
Burnt offerings to God.
Which would be thanking God for the trip. That's what they're doing. They're thanking God for the trip.
Are they going through a barren desert?
It is not a desert, but it probably is not really wonderful territory either.
Where are they going to find something to make fire with? It says they want to
Well, they're already in Jerusalem at this point.
Oh,
Yeah, they're already in Jerusalem at this point. All right, the other thing they take care of, verse 36, remember those edicts back at the beginning of chapter 8 that the king had, that he said, these are the things that Ezra has the authority over, which was a bunch of stuff. Even Ezra was even given the power that you don't obey God, like I can have you executed. So they make sure and get those edicts out to the other people so that all the area around there know the authority Ezra has. Not any questions? That was chapter 8. All right. Quick application. They recognized there was danger. Was this going to be a real simple, easy trip? No. There was a possibility of all kinds of dangers on the way. They recognized that at the beginning, and they made plans. They organized. Remember, they gathered at this, they called it a river, it's probably just a canal. They gathered there to make sure that they had everything, everybody there that was supposed to be. And then they found out what? No Levites. We got to fix this. We got something we got to do. Had they not organized like that and taken off, who knows how far they would have got before they finally figured out they didn't have any Levites. So they organized. And before they left, they prayed for the trip. That God would guide them through the trip. And when they get back, they offer burnt offerings and so forth, thanking God for the trip. So front end, back end. God's part of it. Run across this. You might say, what in the world is traveling mercies? It seems this was a story in my studies. There's a church, I believe the church was in Canada, that pretty regularly had part of their sermons, or not sermons, excuse me, their prayers, what they called traveling mercies. And what they were doing was, people were traveling, they would ask for mercies for the trip. Basically just like Ezra was doing. And that kind of impressed the person that wrote about this. And so think about it. And we do that sometimes. I know we do. I don't know if you do or not, but we're going to make a big trip somewhere or do something. We take out some time to ask God to take care of us along that. And so, traveling mercies, that may be a pretty good habit to get into. And so forth. Okay, any questions about chapter 8?
I would just,
Sure.
Isn't it interesting that this, it seems like in this part of the story, it's very much like they are the treasures, because he counts them just like he counts the gold and the silver, and they're carrying this covenant that has to go on for the covenant to come and fulfill it. It's just
Yeah, you're exactly right. Very good. Okay. Chapter 9. Chapter 9 and 10, I said, is basically one event, or one, it's not a single event in that sense, but it's about one basic idea. And chapter 9 picks up right where chapter 8 leaves off, essentially. It says, these things had been completed. These things that had been completed is what it says at the end of chapter 8 about the edicts going around and gotten around everywhere and so forth. So in other words, basically they're at the point this time, all this stuff that they were supposed to do, the king asked them to do, has been done. Now we can get down to why Ezra came there to begin with. Okay? And that's what we're going to see. Verses 1 and 2. Now when Ezra was praying, and while he was confessing, weeping, and bowing down, whoops, I'm ahead of myself. Hang on. I'm on chapter ahead. Sorry about that. When these things were done, the leaders came to me saying, and me being Ezra, people of Israel and priests and Levites have not separated themselves from the peoples of the land, which with respect to the abominations of thee, and then all the ites. All the ites are listed. Okay? So what had they done? That was so bad. Intermarried. They had intermarried. They had taken wives, and it might have even been opposite way. You know, the Israelite women might take husbands. We're not, but they're emphasizing here on the idea of wives from all these other different nations that were in that area. Was the main problem the fact that they were different races? Was that the issue? No, that wasn't the issue. We're going to come back to some of that hopefully at the end of this. Okay? So that wasn't really the issue. So what was the problem? What was marrying these other, some of the ites out there? What was the problem?
They go in every direction but God's direction.
Well, that's one way of putting it, yeah. They were different faiths. What would happen is, I take on a Canaanite wife, well then instead of following God, I follow the Canaanite wife. Okay? That was the problem, which was the reason that back when you made a reference to it in the lesson this morning, that was the reason that when they first got the promised land, they were told to wipe them all out.
But they didn't.
Well, they didn't. But they were told to wipe them out because they didn't want the intermarrying to take them away from God. And God knew that would happen. And of course, it did happen. Exactly what happened. So they get there, and that's what Ezra has. And notice that it says the people came to Ezra and said, we got a problem. Ezra didn't have to tell them, which I found interesting. Look, verses 3 and 4. What's Ezra's reaction? So when I heard this thing, people have come to him and said, they've taken on all these wives. So when I heard this thing, I tore my garment and my robe, plucked out some of my hair of my head and beard, and sat down. My translation said, ashamed. Oh, no, I'm sorry, astonished. Wrong word. It started with an A, no word. Okay. Have you ever been or ever gotten news that was so distressful? You want to pull out here? And no, I haven't been that distressful that okay, that's not what happened to mine. Okay? That's a thing called genetics. But anyway, but this is this kind of way in that time period where they show that they were upset about something. Tear their garment, pull out their hair, pull out chunks of their beard, show they're distressed. So that's the reaction that he's had. And then in verses 5 through 15, we have the prayer that he utters. Verse 5, at the evening sacrifice I rose from my fastings, and having torn my garment and my robe, I fell to my knees. It says at the evening sacrifice. All right, got a note somewhere. That was about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Okay? That's when the evening sacrifice would have been. All right? So, Ezra has a prayer. goes on to say, we're going to take the pieces of that prayer. He gets up from his fasting. He has been distressed. He sits down, and he's just depressed. Well, he gets up from that. He's not eating. He's distraught, and he humbles himself, prostrate on the ground. In verse 6, it begins what he actually starts talking about. Verses 6 and 7, he has a general confession of the people's sins. This is a general idea of these are the things that has happened. He says, verse 6, "Oh my God, I am too ashamed and humiliated to lift up my face to you, my God. For our iniquities have risen higher than our heads, and our guilt has grown up to the heavens." And it goes on from there. He's very ashamed of the things that they've done. And then in verses 8 and 9, he changes gears just a little bit. This is that same prayer. He changes gears just a little bit. "And now for a little while, grace has been shown from the Lord our God to leave us a remnant to escape and to give us a peg in his holy place, that our God may enlighten our eyes and give us a measure of revival in our bondage." He's thanking God that he's left some of them. There's one left. Now he's going to go on the rest of the prayer to give you an idea also what he thinks, the way Ezra feels like what God should have done. But at this point, he's thanking God for at least leaving a remnant of us, so that we can enjoy it. And it started off pretty good. Yeah, this idea of the peg is the idea of, that you established a group that did what they were supposed to do. But then we went astray from that. And then verses 10 through 14. "And now, O our God, what shall we say after this? For we have forsaken your commandments." And it goes on to, we're going to talk some more part of this in just a second. And now he's going to get specific. This is what we've done. And we have not done what you've told us to do. In verse 14, there's two rhetorical questions that are asked. First one, should we again break your commandments and join in marriage with people committing these abominations? Obviously, that's a rhetorical question. The answer to that is no. But that's what we've done. Second question, would you not be angry with us until you had consumed us, so that there would be no remnant or survivor? If we were to do that, are you catching what Ezra is basically saying here? If we were to do that, Israel deserves what? To be destroyed. I mean, he's basically saying to God, you have the perfect right to wipe us out completely. Sure hoping that isn't what happens. You have the complete, perfect right to do that.
It says, God has punished us less than our iniquities deserve.
Yeah. He's earlier there, basically in the prayer, he said, you've been good to us. You've taken care of us. You haven't, and when it comes to punishment, you haven't punished us near what we deserve. So he's recognizing that they deserve a lot worse than what they're getting. In verse 15, O Lord our God of Israel, you are righteous, for we are left as a remnant, as it is this day. Here we are before you in our guilt, though no one can stand before you because of this. He knows, he's telling God in his prayer, he's saying, we're guilty. Now we're at your mercy. Because we know we've not done what you've asked us to do. Okay. And that in a nutshell was chapter 9. Questions before we go on to chapter 10? We're going to get a solution to this whole thing when we get to chapter 10. Okay. So we're just going to pick up in chapter 10. Chapter 10 begins with, now while Ezra was praying. So you see it just continues right from chapter 9. He's praying. Now look what is happening. This is a public prayer. He hasn't hidden somewhere privately. He's out in public. He is prostrate on the floor and praying. More than likely, fairly loud. Okay? So while he's praying, notice what happens. And it says, and while he was confessing, weeping, and bowing down before the house of God, a very large assembly of men, women, and children gathered from Israel, for the people wept very bitterly. So what's happening?
They said, "Oh, shuck, we need to do better."
A little more than that. Did it touch the people? Yes. Remember, it's the people that came to it to begin with and said, we've done this.
Are they divided and some of them doing this and others not so much? Or are they
Not at this point. This is one issue they're talking about.
Oh,
Now here's what I want you to notice that Ezra didn't do. People have come to him and said, we got this problem. This is what is going on. They're intermarrying all these that are shouldn't be marrying and so forth. Did Ezra get on a platform somewhere and start chewing them out?
no.
Nope. Now what do you do? Did he even start chewing any of them out? Making accusations or throwing, you shouldn't be doing this and what? No. What did he do? He prayed. Now, his prayer was public on purpose, but he hasn't said anything directly to them. He's directed the entire thing to God. It's a prayer that is from the heart, honest, and so forth, but it also had the effect that we see at the beginning of chapter 10. It had the effect that after a large crowd gathers, they understand what they've done. Ezra didn't have to chew on them. Not at all. Through this whole thing. All right. And I'm probably going to butcher this guy's name just like I do most of them. Shechaniah, I think, in verse 2, has a solution. He has a way of solving the problem. Shechaniah, the son of Jehiel, one of the sons of Elam, spoke up and said to Ezra, we have trespassed against our God and have taken pagan wives from the peoples of the land. Yet now there is hope in Israel in spite of this. Now therefore let us make a covenant with our God to put away all the wives and those who have been born to them, according to the advice of my master and of those who tremble at the commandment of our God, and let it be done according to the law. Okay, so his solution, all of those that have married foreign wives have to put them away. Another way of saying divorce them. And the children that they had with those wives go with the wife. He's got to, they're going to not have anything to do with him any longer. And in verse 5, he urges, 45, he urges Ezra to be the one who takes the responsibility to get this done. Remember, Ezra's come there to help and to help revive it. So Shechaniah isn't the one that says, I'm going to take it on me to do it. No. He says, this is your job, Ezra. This is what you came here for, so take it on to do it. Okay? He says to Ezra, verse 4, arise, for this matter is your responsibility. He's saying it's Ezra's responsibility. We also are with you. Be of good courage and do it. It's your responsibility. We're with you to help you out. But you be the one to be the leader. In other words, Ezra's still the leader. He's not trying to take over the leadership idea at all. So Ezra accepts their suggestion. In verse 5, he asks for an oath. In their culture, how important are oaths? Very important. I mean, it was supposed to be legally binding. You swore an oath. Okay? So verse 5. And Ezra rose and made the leaders and the priests and the Levites and all the Israel swear an oath. We obviously don't have the oath, so we don't know what they actually swore. That they would do according to the word. So they swore an oath. Now, one thing it is said, he said back up here earlier, it said, bottom of the last part, verse 3, this was the suggestion, let it be done according to the law. Did the law of Moses completely forbid them marrying those that were not Israelites? The answer to that is no. They did allow proselytes. And they're all the way through the history. In fact, the lineage, the genealogy of Jesus even includes some that were not Israelites. But they were supposed to give up their idol gods. So he's taken some liberties kind of between a couple of different things as far as the law of Moses is concerned about that. But anyway, so Ezra has them swear an oath. They swear the oath. And then when Ezra, once he's had them swear an oath, Ezra separates himself for a moment. Where it says here in verse 6, then Ezra rose up from before the house of God and went into the chamber of Johanan, the son of, and when he came there, he ate no bread, drank no water, for he mourned because of the guilt of those of captivity. From what I understand, this chamber was like a room on the side of the temple. Is where it was. It was a room that was part of the temple. There were rooms within the temple for storage of various things or whatever, but there were kind of like side rooms. And they pretty much think that this was one of those side rooms. He's gone in there, and what's he doing? Fasting. Why? Why is he fasting? Is it for the same reason? Yeah, this time he's in mourning. But he's still in mourning, and he's been given now this responsibility of trying to fix all of this. But the solution is not going to be an easy one. You're asking for a lot of husbands to give up their wives and their children to fix this thing. So he knows it's not going to be an easy solution. Verses 7 and 8, we have kind of a time period given. They issued a proclamation throughout Judea and Jerusalem and to all the descendants of the captivity that they must gather at Jerusalem. How much time are they going to give them to gather at Jerusalem? He gives them 3 days. Now look at the end of verse 8. If they don't show up, look what will happen. It says, show up 3 days according to the instructions of the leaders of the elders. All his property, if they don't show up, all his property would be confiscated, and he himself would be separated from the assembly of those from the captivity. So you got 3 days to show up in Jerusalem to iron out how we're going to take care of this issue. But if you don't show up, you forfeit everything you got. So, do you think they're going to think twice about not showing up? Yeah. All right. So now they've come together on the 12th day of the 9th month. Okay? And they're getting ready to discuss, essentially, this proposal of giving up these wives. Guess what? I really think this was not a coincidence. Because this is a lot of people. Are they meeting in a building? No, they're meeting out in the open. It's raining. I don't think that was a coincidence. Because you got all these people gathered to discuss why you've, how to fix the problem you've got, and it's raining. Yes, ma'am.
On that wheel that you showed, was
That-
it the rainy season?
That wheel? You got to hit me. I was going to go right back to that. Yeah, I put this in for this exact reason. It is now the, I'm sorry. It is the 12th, on the 12th month, on the 9th month, excuse me, 9th month. Okay, so 9th month, right there. There's the 12th month, the 9th month, and it's the 12th of that month. So this is getting kind of like, so now we're in December, and it is, I don't know if y'all can read that up there, but that is the what? The rainy season. Yeah, it is the rainy season. And they meet, and it's raining. But from what we can see, the text from here on, they go ahead and discuss stuff. And Ezra stood before the crowd. What Ezra tells them, you have transgressed and have taken pagan wives and to the guilt of Israel. Now therefore make a confession to the Lord God of your fathers and do his will. Separate yourselves from the peoples of the land and from the pagan wives. So Ezra stands up in front of them and he tells them what they got to do. Okay? And they answer, you're right. That's what we got to do. But they got a but. Why is there always a but? Have you ever noticed that when you got to do something, there's always a but? Okay? Well, what's the but? Verse 13. There, he said, but there are many people, and it is the season of heavy rain, and we're not able to stand outside. Nor is this the work of 1 or 2 days, for there are many of us who have transgressed in this matter. In other words, this is not something we're going to be able to sit here in the rain and hash out in 1 or 2 days. So what's he asking for? He's asking for time, first of all. But they're also asking for some other better solution. They're agreeing that it needs to be done. But they need a solution. So verse 14, we get the solution. Please let the leaders of the entire assembly stand and all And let all those in our cities who have taken pagan wives come to at appointed times, together with the elders and judges their cities, until the fierce wrath of our God is turned away from us in this matter. So in other words, we're going to basically go through this. Let's organize it so that we can present our case and we can be judged, which is only fair, okay? Because there was a chance to convert. It gives some of them a chance to, on their own, put up the wives away or whatever without having to be forced. But it gives them some time. Look at verse 15. Did everybody agree with this? No. But there's only just, I think it's 4, if I remember right, names that are listed here. Does that mean in any, no matter what happens, and you try to come up with a solution, are you ever going to have 100% agreement on how to do it? No, you're not. There were some that disagreed. Now, we don't know why they disagreed. Maybe they didn't think there was enough time. There was speculation that some of them some of these disagreed because they didn't think the punishment was harsh enough. But anyway, there's some that disagreed. But after all was said and done, it says, but the exiles did so. In other words, they decided to do it, despite these few that. And again, we don't know exactly why they disagreed. That's part of this. According to verse 16, they did so. They come back together on the first day of the 10th month to hash out some stuff. Give me just a moment. Finish out some stuff. The whole thing is wrapped up. If you look at verse 17, this whole issue gets wrapped up on the first day of the first month. So whatever solutions they came up and however they went through the judging and so forth, it's now been taken care of completely. And this is what I thought was really interesting. In other words, one of the biggest issues they had, it took Ezra 1 year from the time he left Babylon to get this issue taken care of. So this wasn't something that was going to be settled overnight by any stretch of the imagination. It took a year, but it did get taken care of. We have a list of offenders. Obviously, I'm not going to go through it. I'm going to mention real quick. We have a list of offenders because it makes permanent record and makes it more real. Priest had offered the sacrifice. Foreign wives, some of them had not only wives, but some of them also had children. All right. Something to ponder. And we don't have time to discuss this. If you want to discuss it, maybe next week we'll take a few minutes to do that. You ever wish there were absolute rules about who you're supposed to marry? Or should we have? And does the Bible give us absolute rules? Or what does it give us? Guidelines? Suggestions? That's probably a whole class all by itself, or at least a class period by itself, discussing all the stuff. But think about it. Our rules and regulations basically boil down to the same thing it boiled down to the Israelites. Marry someone who will get you to heaven. Isn't that what basically they all boil down to? And hopefully somebody will make you happy along the way too. Thank you for your time.